Welcome, people of the University of Washington, and welcome, people of the universe at large. My name is Sam Kenyon. Sitting next to me is Chris McBride.
Hello.
And this is The Pivot, where we talk about NBA basketball and American national politics. What do these topics have to do with each other? More than you might think, and really, when you get down to it, everything has to do with everything. So what we're going to do here on this show is talk about interesting headlines and storylines going on in the league, and then halfway through we're going to pivot to politics and talk about the exact same thing on the national stage. So Chris, if you're ready, here we go.
Let's do it.
All right, so first off, we're right in the beginning of the NBA playoffs, which is the best time of the year. They call it the second season, but really it's first in our hearts. The first round has been not super exciting so far, but there have been a couple of really awesome late game finishes, specifically one by Chris Paul of the Clippers and another by Andre Miller of the Denver Nuggets. So Chris Paul in game 2 against the Grizzlies, he laid low all game long, which is his style. He didn't dominate, even though he's got the skills to. He let his team do the scoring for him. He let Blake Griffin get a lot of points, a lot of boards. But then when it came down to it, fourth quarter, when his team needed it, he, in classic Chris Paul style, he took over. He scored the last 4 buckets and then the final amazing game-winning shot.
You know, and even when you think about those first few quarters when Chris Paul kind of deferred to Blake Griffin, it's pretty easy to tell that that's what they needed. The first game of the series, Blake Griffin had 8 points before fouling out. Yep. And so Chris Paul got him involved. He let him create a dominant inside game. And then, he just wanted the last 4 or 5 shots all to himself at the end.
The Grizzlies, they could do nothing to stop him, which was really impressive considering they put one of the best perimeter defenders in the league, Tony Allen, nicknamed the Grindfather, who's got a good 6 inches, maybe a foot on Chris Paul, who's not a tall player by any means, but didn't matter. Just straight up didn't matter.
How often can you say, putting Tony Allen on someone doesn't matter?
Almost never. Chris Paul in the playoffs is a special player. Bill Simmons talks about the Isaiah Thomas school of basketball, which is the sort of classic point guard mentality where you distribute all game long. You get your teammates into it all game long, and then when it's crunch time, it's your number, and you take over.
To be fair, though, I think we're at a university. I don't think sourcing Bill Simmons is a great idea.
No, he's fine. He's fine. He's got some salient points sometimes.
All right.
He's hit and miss. But I do like his ideas about the way Isaiah Thomas used to play, because I didn't really watch a lot of Isaiah Thomas, but I can see how that kind of point guard mentality it doesn't come along every day. And a team can really benefit from it. I mean, it's pretty tremendous. You're going to win games that way.
And Chris Paul, his first individual award was a Rookie of the Year award. That he won. His second individual award was this year at the All-Star game. He won All-Star MVP.
Right.
Those are the only 2 individual awards. Chris Paul, one of the greatest point guards that have ever played this game, right up there with Isaiah. 2 individual awards his entire career. It's crazy.
Yeah.
That just tells you how good, one certain player especially is. But, the talent in the NBA right now.
Well, and, Chris Paul was definitely an MVP consideration early on in the season. The Clippers were so hot, and then they fell off a little bit, and he had some nagging injury troubles, which he kind of has every year, which, I mean, you can't fault the guy for it, but it is slightly disappointing, and you forget in those lulls how good he can be. But playoff time comes, and it's like, oh, yeah, Chris Paul. Yeah. It was incredible.
And the Clippers are deep enough to where he doesn't have to have that many minutes.
I agree.
I forget what the stat was, but he played considerably less minutes than anyone else that was in the MVP discussion. And for him still to be up there is impressive in and of itself.
Yeah, I agree. Now, we contrast this kind of athletic, light on his feet, really skillful last-second, late-game heroics of Chris Paul with another game-winning shot of Andre Miller. That old man game, oh my God, it was so impressive.
It just makes me smile thinking about it.
It was
still,
beautiful.
Like right now.
It was beautiful.
Right now, I just think about that look on his face after he hit that shot. And,
yeah.
he's so cuddly.
He is basketball. I love the idea of old man game because it really makes the game of basketball kind of democratic. It's like, look, you don't have to be as tall as everybody else. You don't have to be as fast or as strong or athletic, because if you have the right moves, if you have the right skills, you can get that old man game and you can do damage.
Yeah,
Andre Miller did damage.
You and I play down at the IMA quite a bit, and we see it all the time. It's not necessarily the most athletic guy. It's just the guy who's willing to do what it takes and is smart about it.
Yeah, there are several players down at the IMA, regular pickup players who have serious old man game. What's so impressive to me about old man game is that you can move in what seems like slow motion, and it's so effective. I love the change of speed way that you can get around the basketball court and score on guys who are bigger than you. It's awesome.
It's inspiring, really. Like, both of us have leg issues, and so it's pretty fantastic thinking, maybe I can't jump in the future. I can barely jump now, but maybe I won't be able to jump at all in the future, but I could still play this game.
Oh, definitely.
Just study a lot of Andre Miller.
And then I think, for my money, the other big, old man game poster boy is Paul Pierce. And he's kind of had that old man game even when he was younger. He was never the guy who's going to jump out of the gym, but he's just got that herky-jerky, the pump fakes, and the footwork. I mean, footwork is so critical for that kind of thing.
He's also fantastic at just keeping his composure. He'll lose the ball. He'll catch it, turn and shoot like it's nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, that's another marker of the veteran player and the veteran savvy. And one thing, even though Chris Paul did his walk-off shot with step backs and with quickness and a little offensive foul, little defensive foul from Tony Allen, so kind of call it a wash, and that floating bank shot, I mean, it was amazing. But Andre Miller did it with the old man game, but the thing they have in common is their veteran savvy, their mentality, which is so important in the game of basketball. You can't lose your composure. You can't lose your cool. Let's change gears here for a second and talk about another topic I think is very interesting, and that is the image of a number of high-level players and how that image has changed over the last several years, the last several seasons, and it seems to really correlate with how they play on the floor. The quintessential example, of course, is LeBron James. He was touted like no other player probably ever was before him. Then, of course, came the decision and the move to Miami. And after that, he became the most vilified sports figure in America. I think it's pretty safe to say. And he endured that for a season and a half, maybe two. And then slowly, public opinion seemed to turn around. And now that he's won his championship and embraced a more humble mentality, people love him. I mean, people can't get enough of him. You don't really hear about the LeBron James haters anymore. And that, even though he's one of the strongest examples of this kind of rise and fall and image rehabilitation, there are a number of examples, including Kobe Bryant, one of the more controversial players of his time. Petulant, dramatic early on, ball hog, wouldn't pass it. I mean, you used to hate him.
The thing that always surprised me the most about Kobe Bryant was how much people loved him. And everyone forgets. Well, they don't forget. They just seem to forgive the fact that he ran Shaq out of town. Shaq, who brought LA 3 championships. And let's not pretend that you couldn't have put an average shooting guard in Kobe's spot and at least competed for those championships.
Shaq in his prime, I mean, that's not something that comes along ever.
Yeah, exactly.
Ever.
So Kobe runs him out of town.
Yeah.
Everyone forgets that Kobe kind of gave in against Phoenix in that one semifinal series. And, he was pretty close to demanding a trade before Pau Gasol came along.
Right.
And it's like everyone just forgave that forever. And it wasn't until this season that my feelings on Kobe Bryant kind of changed.
It often reminds me of, there's a Steve Martin quote that says, "Be so good they can't ignore you." And that's what it makes me think of when I think of these players, because it's like you can be hated, and you can be hated for your entire career, or you can be hated and then you can dominate on the court and you can win a ring. And boy, winning it's like a healing salve. It just, everybody feels a lot better about you once you start to win.
That's completely fair. I think you saw that a little bit with LeBron James.
Oh, yeah.
Reason we're seeing a turnaround on him, I think, is because we're seeing some of this potential that everyone's been talking about for forever. You want to get behind greatness.
Yeah.
But you want to keep it at arm's length if it's not going to live up to the hype.
Yeah.
You don't want to fully embrace. And now that we see the greatness happening, everyone's like, hey, that's my guy.
Yeah, it's very true. And part of me wonders about Kobe specifically, because it seems like as he's approaching retirement age, and this season, a little bit of last season, he seems much more cuddly in a weird way. He's not the killer Black Mamba that he always was, especially with the media, and in particular I'm talking about social media. He's really embraced Twitter and Facebook and written a lot of pretty interesting introspective things and posts, and I think to myself, this is Kobe reaching out to the fans, reaching out to the public in a way that he never did before. He was so enigmatic before.
Well, if there's one thing people love, it's insulting Smush Parker on Facebook.
Yeah, they sure do. And Kobe, no fear about what he puts out there. He puts out a drunken tweet and everyone starts calling him Vino, and he's like, yeah, I love that. I'm Coach Vino now.
Kobe Bryant is the opposite of Dwight Howard in the sense that he doesn't care what we think about him. He cares what history thinks about him. Whereas Dwight Howard has the exact opposite problem.
That's exactly right. And speaking of Dwight Howard, I think him along with Carmelo Anthony are the opposite end of the spectrum in some ways in regard to image rehabilitation from Kobe or LeBron, because Dwight Howard, probably the least liked player in the game right now. I mean, a year of whining and putting your team through what he put Orlando through will do that to you, and then he shows up in LA and he is not nearly good enough to have all that forgiven. Not nearly good enough.
No, he's good enough, but he's not playing well enough right now.
Right, okay.
And he is coming off a surgery.
True, and that is an important distinction, but I feel like the public's pretty unforgiving, like, you have back problems, sure, yeah, but you're out on the floor and you're not that dominant 2009 Dwight Howard. I think if the 2009 Dwight Howard were playing for the Lakers right now, people would feel a lot more warmly towards him because, like we've said, success breeds forgiveness.
Absolutely. And we might see that this year with Carmelo Anthony. Not that he has anything necessarily to forgive. He had some stuff early in his career, sure, the don't snitch video. But, for some reason, people just don't like him, myself included. I can't even tell you. I just hate his mustache.
Yeah, it is a pretty thin it's a questionable mustache for sure. I'm with you there. My feelings towards Melo have warmed this season, I think in a similar way that yours have warmed towards Kobe. Melo and Dwight used to be the two players I really didn't care for the most, but he's been playing so well. Carmelo Anthony, I mean, real MVP candidate at the beginning of the season when the Knicks were really hot, and then at the end of the season, boy, he turned it on, snatched the scoring title from Kevin Durant, hitting big shots and not doing it in that old classic Carmelo way of ball hogging, putting up 35 shots every game, never passing the ball. He's embraced the team role more, it makes him more likable.
See, it's weird to me because I was thinking the same exact thing, that Carmelo's kind of embraced, be a little bit more like LeBron. But in all actuality, this year, shockingly, his second lowest assist total ever.
Is that true?
That's true.
Wow.
His third most shots in his entire career. And he's not a player who has suffered a lot with injury. He's no LeBron James, but he's also not Steve Nash.
True.
So he's had complete seasons to throw up shots. I was shocked too. It didn't make any sense, but this is his third highest shooting field goal attempts for his career.
That's really fascinating. That's a great stat. It's so funny how sometimes numbers don't reflect what you see and what you feel in the game. All right, dish it off to the big man and don't shuffle your feet because it's time to pivot. Okay, now comes the time of the show where we flip the script and start talking about American national politics. I think that a lot of first-time listeners, which is everyone because this is the pilot episode, will question, what do politics and basketball have to do with each other? And I say, if you don't see a relationship between the two, you're not looking hard enough. So our first topic that we're going to examine is, of course, the major headline of the last week and a half or so is the Boston Marathon bombings. Obviously, an extremely tragic event. What I'm curious about going into the future is, what's the security environment in Boston and around the country going to be in response to this attack? Because obviously after 9/11, there was a much heightened security atmosphere, and I don't anticipate it's going to be that great after the Boston Marathon bombing, obviously because, one, it was much smaller, but two, the American attitude towards terrorism and giving up freedom for security, I think has changed and will continue to shift. A recent poll that I found very interesting is, for the first time since 9/11, a slight majority of Americans are not willing to sacrifice freedom for more security. This was a Fox News poll. 45% to 43% said we are unwilling to sacrifice any freedom for security. In the post 9/11 era and the decade following, that hasn't been the case. People have been so afraid of terrorism that they're willing to put metal detectors everywhere and have their backpacks searched when they go into a basketball arena or something like that. And I just think it's very interesting and kind of enlightened in a way that the public is starting to realize that that's not the right response.
Yeah, that does seem that's a great poll. I wonder though how much of that is from freedom fatigue or loss of freedom, the fatigue that comes from that. When you look at the Boston Marathon bombing, last I checked, it was 3 people were killed, and over 180 were injured.
Yep.
Is that about right?
Yep.
So it's not at the scale of 9/11.
No.
9/11, no one's ever going to say a post-Boston Marathon bombing world. But we constantly are living in a post-9/11 world. The weirdest thing to me to think about is the fact that you and I are older students.
True.
We look at the students that we work with or that are cohorts here in school. A lot of them were in junior high or elementary school when this happened.
Yeah.
They didn't have an adult consciousness at all pre-9/11, and I've never been a legal adult post 9/11, and I'm the older of the two of us, which means neither of you, or haven't been a legal adult pre 9/11.
Right.
So when people talk about a post 9/11 world, that's just the world.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So at this point, what else can be taken? I guess might be sometimes a question. I don't know.
Yeah, it makes me think a lot about the country of Israel, and I think that since Israel has existed, they have had to deal with sort of surprise violence in everyday life, in their public life, suicide bombings, car bombings, things of that nature. And if you look at the Israeli response, certainly their security environment is even tighter than what we have here, and I think probably much tighter than what America would find acceptable in terms of checkpoints and metal detectors and things like that. But their mentality is one of, we are not going to be a society in fear. We are not going to let these acts, which may not be able to be prevented in some cases, stop our society from functioning the way we want it to function.
I think it was Joe Biden the other day who had the quote, "We won't let terrorists define America in the 21st century." I think that's a fantastic quote. And,
great quote.
It's why I like old Joe a little bit.
Yeah. That's he puts his foot in his mouth, but that's eloquent. That's an example of his eloquence. Another poll that's related to this is it was part of the same poll, and it was an even wider margin, 48% to 41% said they are more concerned, Americans, they are more concerned that the government will go overboard in terms of not respecting constitutional rights and freedoms in pursuit of investigating terrorism, rather than their fear that they'll go overboard in respecting civil rights and not investigating terrorism. I see a change in the mentality, and I welcome it, honestly.
Was that a Fox News poll?
Yeah, same poll.
So my only critique of that argument, which I agree, if this is how Americans feel, that's fantastic. Fox News, their respondents, now I don't know if this was a TV poll, if this was one of their average calls to random people, if it was, what the sample size was, all that good stuff. But the average Fox viewer is probably more afraid of government overreach with the Democrat in Congress or in the White House than they were with the Republican in the White House. And I'll bet you it's probably the same the opposite way.
Yeah, actually, that's a great point that I hadn't considered before. The conservative mentality is definitely one of worrying about government overreach when the opposition party is in control of the government,
and that's not just the conservative necessarily.
No, that's true. The liberal ideology would act similarly, although I think in general Republicans innately fear government power a little more than liberals do.
Sure.
But certainly you put G.W. Bush back in the White House, and all of a sudden the left is going to be very afraid of government overreach. That's definitely true on both sides. One thing I found very interesting was the White House response to the Boston bombing event did not include the word terrorism, which I think everyone was watching for and waiting for and seeing if that's what it was going to be labeled by the White House. And when it wasn't initially, especially on Fox News, speaking of Fox News, there was quite a bit of criticism. And I wonder, is that criticism fair? I'm not sure myself. The word terrorism is such a weighty label that it shouldn't be used without, serious deliberation. But on the other hand, it shouldn't be hidden either when it is legitimate terrorism. And I think that this event counts.
Oh, absolutely. And I think since that initial press conference, the White House would agree with you. I don't mind my White House taking a couple days to define something, as we saw in the consulate killings of last year.
Right.
They take their time,
right.
And if they say anything accidentally, then the press,
right.
the opposition is all over absolutely every word.
Better to be cautious and accurate rather than quick and inaccurate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think that's true. All right, let's hop topics one more time for the final time this show. And the Boston bombing has brought up a new angle on the immigration debate. And immigration as an issue has been something that America is quite divided on for a number of years now, but typically it's framed in terms of immigrants coming from Mexico and the effect it has on the economy and on the local government expenditures in terms of having to provide services to a group of people who aren't paying taxes and blah, blah, blah. But now it's being framed in terms of national security. And I think that's a very interesting flip on the framework through which the issue is viewed. And I think it's part of the reason that we've quickly seen two bills now in Congress where before immigration sort of stagnated for quite some time. But you put national security attached to an issue, and that's going to speed up the process quite a bit.
Absolutely. Napolitano, Janet Napolitano,
right?
She came out saying that these bills in both the Senate and the House, which have yet to be reconciled, they're about national security. We need to make things a little easier to start documenting some of the people that are in our country, while making it easier for them to come in. So by creating these gateways that people would have to pass through, but they could easily pass through, we can more thoroughly vet the people coming into our country.
My personal position on immigration has been sort of similar to those conclusions for some time now. My thinking is that the smart thing to do is not fight immigration, in that I don't think that you can stop it, and really in a weird way, I think it almost we should feel a bit of a sense of pride that the situation in America, the American society, the American economy is so appealing that people want to come here. And I have long felt that the best way to deal with it is not to put up a wall and not to deport them, because people want what they want, and if they want America, they're going to find a way to get here. The smart thing to do is design an immigration system that accommodates that influx of people, because more people should be better for the economy. It should be better for our society as a whole.
Well, I mean, I don't know how much economists would necessarily agree with the more people equals better, because we do have a high unemployment rate.
Sure.
So, and illegal immigration, as we've discussed before, listeners have no idea what I'm talking about.
Right.
But as we've discussed before, undocumented workers are good for the GDP. That's something that people don't want to consider, but it's absolutely true. They pay all their living expenses here. They get paid less than the work they're putting out.
Yep.
I mean, without bringing up too much academia, Marx would talk about how they're the most exploited of everybody, and that exploitation actually is kind of good for American GDP.
And this is a little bit what I'm talking about in terms of a benefit to the economy. I think that actually, real quick, one thing I find very interesting is just recently, I think before the Boston bombing, before these two bills were in Congress, the AP, the Associated Press, chose to remove the phrase illegal immigrant from its lexicon. The Associated Press and AP Style, which governs most, if not all, journalism across the country, said, we are not going to use the term illegal immigrant anymore. And their rationale behind it is that the word immigrant means legal. To be an immigrant is to be legal. And so if you say illegal immigrant, it's sort of inaccurate. Now, I think that this is probably the right thing to do by the AP, but it's also a little bit confusing, because then how do you differentiate between a legal immigrant and one who is not, and the term illegal alien seems like a step backwards. It seems even... Is
that what they went to? Illegal alien?
No, I don't think so. I don't know what the term is now. That's what I'm saying. It's confusing. If you can't use the phrase illegal immigrant anymore, what phrase do we use?
Undocumented worker is generally a preferred way.
Yeah, probably. Undocumented
And
worker.
I think, because that brings us back to the debate we've had before, I think that that's very telling. Because I think the opus of this conversation needs to not be on the individual, not on the Mexican immigrant who came over here without the proper documentation, without paying the correct amount of money.
Right.
And it puts it squarely on the people who hire them. I can't blame an individual for looking out for their best interests.
Sure.
I'm fairly liberal. I'll blame a corporation for subverting American interests in this situation.
In the previous conversation that you and I had that we keep alluding to, it was about these issues, and I think the consensus that we came to is that I agree with you. In terms of enforcement and in terms of the law and the Justice Department and Homeland Security and whatever trying to correct this issue or fix it, it does not make sense to go after the individual immigrant, because they're just doing what's best for them and their family. And I sort of think that, honestly, we would all do the same. If you lived in Mexico, wouldn't you want to live in America instead?
Absolutely.
But the businesses that hire them, the large agribusinesses that use them to pick their crops and things like that, these are the violators that you can stop, because they are the gateway of employment that these immigrants have. Without them, it's not so enticing to come here illegally anymore.
Absolutely. So you're getting to incentives, which you love,
Love incentives.
and decentives, which I'm kind of a fan of for the corporations. I like that conclusion.
Great conclusion. Everybody who's joined us for this pilot episode, thank you so much. It's been a thrill to have you. Obviously, these are complex issues that we're distilling down into a short amount of time. We'll look at expansion in the future, perhaps. But for now, this is Sam Kenyon and Chris McBride saying thanks for joining us.